Hey all, Brent here with an anime primer on the modern era of anime, which I define as basically 1998 till now. And this is always hard because it's hard to say what's a classic when and what's stood the test of time when nothing stood the test of time yet. I mean, how do we know what's going to last? But we can talk about some of the trends, some of the big things that's been going on. Um, in fact, that's one of the big things about modern anime is that there are a lot of different factors involved, lots of different trends. One is the impact of light novels. Now, light novels have definitely been the inspiration for a lot of anime. The Dirty Pair anime franchise from the 80s and 90s was a bunch of light novels originally. But certainly in the 21st century, especially light novels have been a major jumping off point for anime. A lot of anime originally light novels, Haruhi, Boogie Pop, lots of things like that. And this gives rise to an interestingly different story structure than manga, for example, where manga is basically these little 13-page issues, which are then collected up into volumes of manga. But the creator isn't necessarily thinking it in terms of volume length when they're drawing the manga. They're thinking of sort of the issue length. The stopping point for a manga volume is almost arbitrary for a lot of shows or a lot of series. So the question becomes when you move over to light novels, that's a novel, I mean, beginning, middle, end. Now, light novel is shorter than a typical novel. It's really more a novella with a few manga-style drawings in it to illustrate characters and major plot moments. But since you have that more defined structure, it's harder to make a 13 or 26 episode anime series out of that. You have to end up rearranging stuff. Haruhi's a great example where they ended up having to pull things from this novel and from this novel and just sort of pull various things to get that 13 episode story, 13 episode count for the story. You also have dating sims. Now, those are also now a very popular starting point for anime. And this is partly Gainax's fault. See, basically in the mid-90s, a Gainax employee basically dragged a computer into Gainax's office, set it up, and showed them the dating sims of the time, which basically were these simple choose-your-own-adventure style stories where they just put some artwork up on the screen. You get to choose from one of a couple different options, usually dialogue options. And then, depending on what you chose, would determine how the girl reacted to you and ultimately whether she'd have sex with you. And the thing is, the artwork at the time was relatively poor. And this was Gainax, and this is the mid-90s, and so they were at the end of a string of disastrous business decisions. They just weren't making money. And they said, hey, we need very little money for this, and we can put it out there, and because we are artists, we can actually draw, it can look good. So Gainax started coming out with computer games that were actually well drawn, particularly the Evangelion strip poker series they became sort of famous for, and other things as well. And basically they started really making money off of these computer. In fact, arguably the reason why Gainax was solvent for a long time and was able to make some of the later shows is because of the money they made off of those other products. They sold extremely well, and so dating sims continued off of that, and just that era of bringing better artists and better stuff to it. Dating sims today are still almost identical to what they were like back then, at least in terms of structure and content. It's just better drawn, better stories, things like that. But screens come up, you see an image, you choose your dialogue, and a girl possibly has sex with you. Of course, now there's some tweaks now, like the Higurashi series all have these violent plot lines, but it's still the same basic thing. And the advantage is basically you need an artist and you need a programmer. That's all you really need. Everything else you can get. You can get music from people and stuff like that. But those are the two core things. The logic is pretty straightforward, and the drawings are on the order of a couple of dozens. But not the thousands and tens of thousands you need for an anime, for example. They can sell very well. So the popularity has been given rise to a lot of anime adaptations of these things. Key Visual Arts, for example, made Air, Canon, and Clannad. Leaf made To Heart, which is a big franchise over in Japan. Very little of To Heart has made it over here, but it's huge in Japan. You also have the rise of Moe, and one of the problems with Moe is that this term has evolved and changed a lot. So, like, my definition of a Moe girl is someone who's kind of cute, reserved, but helpful and compliant. But that's just kind of my definition. And Moe has kind of grown to encompass anything that you find kind of attractive. Um, Also, the definition of the Moe archetype, even though that's the term has evolved, has also led to the creation of other stereotypes, or at least the definition of other stereotypes. They may have been there, but now we have words for them, like tsundere, who are the outwardly hostile, stuck-up girl who inwardly has a heart of gold. That's tsundere. Other things like that. You also have fan service more these days, and by fan service I don't just mean panty shots and nude scenes, things like that. I'm talking about content that caters to fan taste specifically. This actually goes back to Tenchi Muyo, which essentially invented the harem anime, and after that, harem anime would often use the same kinds of girls in their shows. The reserved, traditional, introverted girl, the fiery, wild, extroverted girl, the cute, preteen girl, the responsible one, the airhead, things like that. And so now we have archetypes like the bookish girl who wears glasses, the cute, bubbly, preteen, the tsundere, the painfully shy girl who has to be sort of coaxed out of her shell, the extroverted, adventurous, outgoing girl, things like that. And now we have shows where everything's sort of designed specifically to cater to specific otaku fetishes, and that's kind of scary for an art form. So we'll see how that evolves. There's also the impact of massively multiplayer online role-playing games and JRPGs, Japanese role-playing games. Not only have a lot of those been turned into anime and been bases of anime, although usually the anime sucks, they've also influenced anime in terms of like visual style, things like that. Certainly, the work of Square Enix on like the Final Fantasy series has, in their cinematic sequences, has inspired anime to look cool like that, and to introduce more CGI-like effects in their shows. Obviously, .hack was based off of the idea of an MMO that's sort of single player, and introducing all sorts of weird plot stuff. But there's plenty of other examples, and again, it's more a matter of anime playing off of JRPG stereotypes and MMO concepts and just exciting combat, things like that we're starting to see now. A lot of the fantasy anime now feels more like a JRPG than before, where they used to feel more like Lotus Wars, a D&D campaign session log, basically. So those are some of the major trends in modern anime. Not an exhaustive list, but some of the major things that we can see these days. And that is the end of the Anime Primer video series. See you next time for another series. Take care.